in the last 30 years in the state to improve how we're supporting every child. But there is more work to be done. Although I will say that there are very significant bright spots that I see when I visit schools all over the state of Texas. And in fact, I'll tell you that there's a pattern that I see when I'm out in the field. There is one curricular area that does very consistently seem to be performing differently than the others because of the operational practices of our teachers in that curriculum area. When I think about this curricular area, it is extremely well vertical aligned. What's happening with younger kids is less complicated than what's happening with middle school kids, and then at the high school kids, it's building on the skills that they have learned in elementary school. It is very much a vertically aligned curricular area that adds complexity and skill over time, but as you master the fundamentals when you're young. The instructional practices in this curricular area involve basically everywhere a very common assessment of student performance. It happens every week, in fact, in this curricular area. It's very common and very consistent, and when the results come in from that assessment, it is actually more than just the assessment. Uniquely in this curricular area, the lessons are videotaped, and the teachers are reviewing how the students responded in those classrooms, in that environment, and they're looking at the assessment results. And if you go to data team meetings in this curricular area, you hear stuff that you don't consistently hear everywhere. Because sometimes you'll reflect on a student's results on some recent task that you've given them, and you'll hear teachers say, well, you know, Mike's having trouble at home. His parents are going through a divorce. That's why he wasn't able to focus. Or Mike came to school hungry all week. I know he's going through some real challenges at home. That's the reason why he didn't learn this. But in fact, in this curricular area, that's not where the conversation stops. The teachers say, all right, Mike's parents are going through a divorce. I need to talk to Mike. I need to get him to where his head is straight. Mike's not regularly accessing food. I need to get Mike food. It is sort of a no excuses, high expectations. We will always do what is necessary to get results and to make sure that our students master this particular content area, this curricular area. And in fact, when the teachers in the data team meetings, they're reflecting on the challenges that came from that week's formative assessment result. They don't try to solve every problem under the sun. They try to solve narrow problems. Well, there's one or two areas that we're going to work on next week based upon what we saw coming out of this week's results. Does anybody have any idea what curricular area I'm talking about? Football. This is what it looks like. In fact, in many of our athletic endeavors, this is what it looks like. That short cycle assessment is under Friday night lights. It is the Friday night football game, and incidentally, there's no privacy laws on the results of that assessment. Everybody knows how the kids did on it, and they're talking about it in the grocery store and church and everywhere else. The data team meeting is at the field house, and you're looking at game film, going over and over and over again on where did my players do well, where did my players not do well, and the problems that are solved in the field house because I was there listening to the coaches solve the problems. They're not like, you know, the 43 counter is a mess, and that's the end of the conversation. They're looking at narrow aspects of like hit placement coming off the line. They're thinking about how the ball exchange happens. They're thinking about blocking assignments, and they're going to say, we're going to solve 2 or 3 problems this week. That's it. That's what we're going to work on over and over and over again until our students reach mastery in that content area. It is a no excuses environment. Absolutely. We are going to find a way to win. And in fact, you know, there's probably not a whole lot of coaches that get retained with extensive losing records. So there's certainly an environment of high accountability. We see this very consistently in our athletic endeavors, and we see it as a high watermark at football. And I don't know if y'all have been paying close attention, but we are really good at football in Texas. And the question is can we be that good in math? And in English, and in science, and in social studies, and all of our academic endeavors? I think that the lessons learned by extremely effective coaching practices are very applicable to what we do in our classrooms every day. And we at TEA have in fact launched an initiative focused on supporting these practices in classroom instruction. We call it Lesson Study. It is a deep dive on narrow problem solving. You pick one lesson, and you plan, and you execute, you evaluate, and you review, and you re-execute that lesson till you achieve the highest level of execution quality. It is what I learned 25 years ago in the field houses Garland, not realizing when I would ever use that knowledge, but it is extremely useful. Classrooms where you see lesson study practice are actually filmed on a regular basis, because we want the teachers to review the game film, to see them and to see what's happening with students. I mean, imagine, for example, you're looking at a student that kind of does this when a question's asked, and then the hand goes back down right afterwards. And you get a chance to see that after the fact, and you start to reflect on what is going through that kid's mind. You know, they felt almost comfortable enough to ask a question, but then they pulled it back. And what kind of changes would we want to make instructionally to further empower our students? Teachers, other teachers come and watch. It is a team sport, teaching is, and reflect on every aspect of the lesson. Afterwards, it is, John Madden himself coming into the teacher's lounge and looking at the game film, looking at the assessment results, and saying, what minor changes do we need to make this lesson better? And then another teacher on the team teaches the same lesson to a different group of kids, and you look at the results. This is great coaching practice. It is great teaching practice. And I think that what we already know and do consistently on the playing fields, on the gridiron, in the basketball courts, in volleyball games, in wrestling matches, swim meets, on the baseball diamonds, this practice needs to be much more consistently happening in every single math class in the state of Texas. This practice needs to be much more consistently happening in every English class in the state of Texas.